Monica flirts with Brian for a bit, and Brian pulls the stare and drive on her, which is really dangerous. Do not do this. Roman calls him out and then says to Monica,
"You got that from me."
"Ooh, hang on." Very
Wait,
poignantly.
he got that from me? So was he doing the stare and drive to Brian?
Too Fast, Too Furious is the sequel to The Fast and the Furious, and it's also super gay. It's super gay. It's so gay it made me gay, and it can for you too. I've seen this interpretation before
What? That's is definitely.
online, but I've always been skeptical of this interpretation. Despite never having seen the film, I'd seen the sequels, and I know that these characters are just friends, so it must be just some shippers writing desperate headcanon, right? Well, so in One Fast, One Furious, Brian O'Connor is an undercover cop who infiltrates Dominic Toretto's gang, but he ends up becoming close friends with him, and at the very end, he lets Dom go. Because of this, Brian is discharged from the FBI. Too Fast, Too Furious is again about Brian, now an ex-cop, partnering up with a new character, his old criminal friend Roman Pierce. They're recruited by the FBI and a double agent named Monica to infiltrate another gang led by a guy named Verone. If they complete the mission, Brian will get reinstated and Roman will be released from his parole. Roman hates Brian at first because he blames him for getting arrested for some reason, and over the course of the movie they will need to reconcile with each other. Monica is also Brian's love interest throughout the film. With the help of Monica, Brian and Roman get a meeting with the gang. They have to win an initiation by racing to collect a package for Verone. They win and Verone gives them the job. Brian and Roman find out that Monica isn't just undercover, she's also Verone's mistress. So there's a bit of, ooh, can we trust her? And then there's a bit of messing around. Brian and Roman have to do a drag race to win some cars to help them with the job, yada yada. Verone threatens Brian over flirting with Monica. Monica sleeps with Brian and almost blows everyone's cover, and then the big heist happens. Roman and Brian are friends again. They pick up a whole bunch of cash for the gang. The FBI almost messes everything up, so they pull a switcheroo on them, and in the end they catch Verone by driving a car into his yacht. The FBI catches the bad guy. Our boys get their lives back. The end. It's pretty simple. But let's talk about subtext. Text is any content of the piece of media that you're consuming. Words and books, lyrics and songs, but also things like illustrations in a comic book. And in film, it's everything that's in the film. Script, camera angles, lighting, acting. Now, whatever is being said to the audience by the text can be subverted by what other elements of the text are implying. Note, for example, the Kuleshov effect, where a performance can both heavily influence and be heavily influenced by the editing. The results of a certain performance matched with a certain cut can create unintentional results on an audience. So when you watch this film and any part of you thinks to yourself, are they gay? Even for a second, that's your brain taking in all of the information given by the dialogue, performances, camera, and choreography, and deducing that there's a romantic connection here. And that's a beautiful thing. But our characters never kiss. It's never said out loud. So is this just some repressed tension within viewers who want to see them as boyfriends? Or is there something in the subtext that honestly leads people to that conclusion? So let's investigate the queer movie inside of this heist movie. I've gathered all the evidence. I'm gonna make my case. This is Too by Too Furious. Brian O'Connor is back and better than ever. Just kidding, he's in the bad books of the FBI for letting Dom Toretto go at the end of One Fast, One Furious. He's recruited from another job by Monica and Raiden from Mortal Kombat Annihilation, who uses his lightning powers to make him crash through parking taxes. But Brian is feeling really lonely. Things ended weirdly in his last relationship, and he doesn't want to get partnered up with someone just new. Having reinvigorated his romantic side, he feels inspired to try and reconcile with his ex-boyfriend, Roman Pierce. We meet Roman, who's participating in muscle car derby. He sees Brian and gets extremely pissed off. He even bites his lip as he walks away, reminded immediately of the deep sexual relationship they had. The camera shows his house arrest tracker. This is a very important symbol of the weight shackled onto him of the heartbreak that he's been feeling. Brian whistles at him to get his attention, kind of like a cat caller. We get an extremely dynamic whip pan around as Roman finally faces his ex-boyfriend. Roman bites his lip again as he walks towards him, the sexual tension building as he approaches this beautiful blonde man, and Roman punches him. They get into a fierce scrap. They grapple on the dirt and Roman ends up on top of him. Brian wraps his legs around Roman before receiving another blow. It's so hot that even the police captain goes, woo! They continue their homoerotic grapple, and we cut to a shot showing Brian's ankle before comparing it to Roman's, who is the only one shackled. What this symbolism is telling us is that Brian does not have as much baggage as Roman. Rome was the one most hurt by the breakup. Brian insults him by saying he fights like shit before saying straight up, out loud, I'm gonna choke you.
Yeah, I'm gonna choke you.
And then he puts his hand on his throat. Like, come on, guys. This is not only gay, it's extremely erotic. And I don't even need to elaborate on this. This is straight up a clothed sex position. We get some hints as to why Roman is so mad at Brian. And he says,
I did 3 years, Brian. I told you it wasn't my fault.
But he finally relents under Brian's chokehold, and they get up in a very extended shot. He kneels in front of him in like a domineering position before sitting back. They lie with their legs apart in front of each other, which kind of looks like two lovers who are exhausted after a climax. And then Roman says,
when I needed your ass, you were nowhere to be found.
And at this point, I'm genuinely worried about getting demonetized. They stand up and have a face-off. Their faces so close together. Brian says,
fan
"I need you
fiction
to come
is
to Miami and
crazy."
drive with me." So romantic. And then Roman clarifies what he meant by 3 years.
I did 3 years in jail. 3 years in jail. Off you, Brian.
Guess what, ladies and gentlemen? We got a metaphor. While Brian broke off the relationship and headed for new ground, for Roman, the breakup rocked his world. He spent 3 years alone and lost, both literally and emotionally, trapped in isolation, shackled by heartbreak, betrayed by the man he loved.
It's a metaphor. I know it's a metaphor.
I really relate to this. When you're grieving a relationship, you feel trapped in yourself. Brian gets even more in his face, and they get this close to kissing, and Roman pushes him off, naturally. An interesting thing here is the captain doesn't even look at them. He just can't. It's not his conflict. He's simply there facilitating.
I ain't in it.
Almost like a couple's counselor. Brian and the captain
Oh
drive
my
Roman to the
God.
police station. Roman's a little unsure about this whole thing, but Brian licks his lips again as he comforts Roman, trying to get him to trust him again. And then we get to the third wheel of this love triangle. That's right, it's a love triangle movie. Monica. Both of our bisexual heroes are immediately attracted to her. At this point where their cars are revealed, Roman gives a very suggestive touch to Brian, saying,
Don't even think about taking the convertible. It might loosen your moves.
ooh. Monica decides to get in the car with Brian, and Roman immediately objects.
Why she gotta ride with you?
This is a very important element of the love story. And this is my favorite part of this reading. This part blew my mind when I was looking back at it. Monica flirts with Brian for a bit, and Brian pulls the stare and drive on her,
What are you doing, Brian?
which is really dangerous. Do not do this. Roman calls him out and then says to Monica,
You got that from me.
"Ooh, hang on." Very
Wait,
poignantly, he never
wait.
says how exactly.
Wait, he got that from me? So was he doing the stare and drive to Brian?
He got it from him. So under this reading, based on all this evidence, it's not too much of a leap to realize that Roman did this move on Brian early on in their relationship. And Monica even acknowledges this, looking back at Brian with like a "holy shit, really?" face. She knows, guys. She knows. What we're really looking at here is a love triangle between a woman and 2 bi men. Roman and Brian have to race to collect a package, working together for the first time in 3 years. And the flirting really kicks up a notch. Roman drives up alongside Brian and holds up his middle finger. Brian grins at him, and then Roman swirls his finger around in the air. Now, for the sake of children in the audience, I'm not going to elaborate any further, but for us adults, we know what this is. This is one of Roman's moves. Brian laughs and says,
Oh yeah, you think you're the bomb, Ron?
"Yeah, he's probably the bomb. You might even say the top bomb." This entire sequence is full of these moments. The references to driving skills are so explicitly analogous to sex, it's almost impossible to not notice it. Our 2 boys are clearly having a lot of fun driving together for the first time. Racing was clearly a huge part of their relationship, and this is the first moment of the rekindling of that romance. It was their favorite thing to do together. The sparks are flying again. They're flirting and working together effectively. Friendly competition with a sexual charge. They find the car they're looking for, and Roman takes off his shirt to reveal a beautiful, sweaty, muscly body, using his shirt to punch a window open. Brian gets what they're looking for and says,
Now put your blouse back on, hater.
which, oof, it's just such a spicy dig at his ex. I've literally seen gay men talk to each other this way. They arrive back, and Monica greets the boys. As she's walking away, Roman snaps at Brian, asking,
What you checking her out for?
with the exact same jealousy someone would have for their partner's wandering
my
eyes.
God.
And then we cut to a whole scene later, and they're still talking about it.
Yes, you were. No, it wasn't.
Like a good 2 minutes have passed, and they're still not done talking about it. Kind of like a couple. Brian finally admits he was checking her out and says to Roman, "Shut up." And Roman just says,
You shut up.
"I don't know what to tell y'all. This is clearly a bitter jealousy. Not of Monica, but of Brian's eye." And then Monica says,
Both you girlies shut up.
the crazy thing about this is it's not a secret. I think Monica knows exactly what's going on between them, which makes it a really interesting dynamic. Rather than keeping their sexuality a secret, everyone here knows what's going on. All the bickering is coming from an honest place in the characters, and Monica's just trying not to get involved but really wants to get with Brian. Everyone has their own motivations for doing what they're doing, and Brian's caught between these 2 really attractive people, knowing that if he pursues Monica, he's gonna hurt Roman. It's just a good romantic comedy setup. Oh, then we get to some really fun stuff. So the boss comes in and gives the terms of the job, and Roman tries to get more money out of him. He teases Verone with a little poke, and Verone reacts extremely aggressively.
Don't ever touch me.
It's almost like he's reacting homophobically to a gay man touching him. So not only is their sexuality extremely present, it's also influencing their relationship to the villain? That's,
Reading
wait,
this
is
script
a
with
good
it while
queer movie?
keeping
And
a
then we get
straight
big
face must
reveal.
be
They
quite
walk
a
away,
feat.
and Brian gives an extremely flirtatious neck grab before demanding that he will do the talking.
From here on out, I do the talking.
Like to me, you want to do a little more than that.
Brian goes,
Oh, what's that supposed to mean?
which is a really important line that's actually going to come up later.
It means you're always getting in trouble over a female, Brian. Oh,
Wait, maybe they didn't just break up over this police squabble. Maybe Brian cheated on Roman with a woman. That would explain so much. The over hostility from Roman over Brian flirting with Monica, the over the top pain that he feels over the betrayal. Brian looks genuinely called out by this. Roman stares at him with this knowing look, and Brian sinks back into the car, feeling personally attacked. What these looks tell us is that they've had a history with Brian's behavior towards women in their relationship. This makes it not just bi, but genuinely interesting. The breakup wasn't just some hack conflict related to their job. It may have stemmed from some heavy commitment failings on Brian's part. This is compelling. So they go to Ludacris's garage to suit up their cars, and Brian starts telling Roman everything cool that's there. It was their favorite hobby together, so he's eager to please Rome by showing him around. Rome then says,
Man, it's so hot and humid out here, I can't even wear no drawers.
Yeah, tell me about it.
"Oh, guys, you're killing me here." And then he says,
Potential out here.
before we cut to a ton of hot babes, Roman immediately turns on his attraction to these women, and Brian grabs him to pull him away with a smirk on his face. Roman's trying to get back at Brian by flirting openly with all these women, and Brian knows it, dragging him away with you. This interaction continues when they meet up with Suki, who shows off her new drawing. Roman says,
That's some artistic shit. You got talent, girl.
Yeah, she's good. She's the best.
Brian brushes it off in a hilariously dismissive way. Yeah, she's good, she's the best. It feels sarcastic.
You got talent, girl.
Yeah, she's good. She's the best.
It's like he's trying to end the interaction immediately so that Rome won't hit on her. There's this really cool back and forth going on throughout this scene. They're taking their sexual tension out on other women around them. They're trying to one-up each other. If I can't have you, then I'm gonna get everyone else. Brian then introduces Rome to Tej and asks if he could let Rome sleep in Tej's cot. Tej then asks,
What's wrong with your place, man?
like in a very obvious way, like he'd assume that he'd be sleeping with Brian. Rome then says,
I don't want to stay with him. He got bad habits.
Tej looks at them and chortles like you would seeing a bickering couple. God, it's so obvious by this point. I'm starting to fully believe that this is the real meaning of the movie, but I'm gonna keep going because it gets even better. As if this love triangle is not enough, we've got to bring Dom Toretto into it. The boys catch up with Raiden and their boss, and Rome tells Bilkins that Monica, Eva Mendes, is sleeping with the bad guy. And then Raiden goes,
What do you think, O'Connor? You think she's compromised? You should know.
and we all know what this is. In the last movie, Brian made some new friends and had a pseudo-romance with Mia Toretto and potentially her brother. Roman then finds out that he let Dom go in the last film and angrily tears away at his sandwich from his mouth, completely furious. He demands an explanation, saying,
Let your man go, huh?
At this point, Roman is hurt at Brian's betrayal, jealous of his pursuit of a woman in front of him, and now he's hearing that he stayed loyal to another man? You couldn't be loyal to me, but you could to some other guy? Am I a joke to you? Did our love mean nothing? Brian doesn't want to talk about it and says the best line reading of the film.
I said forget about it, cuz. So beautiful.
Brian ends up saving their butts in a car race, and Roman kind of gets over it, grateful that Brian came through when it counted. As we'll find out later, it's not entirely Brian's fault that Roman got arrested. So Brian not wanting to talk about Dom isn't an admission of guilt. It's more of a conflict of two different emotional states, which is something that they easily pass over. If you're having a fight with someone and you know that it's just an overreaction, once you calm down, you can actually have a real conversation about it. Or if we're using this car racing as sex metaphor, maybe they kind of, deal with it in another way. And because they've calmed down, when they go to a club to meet with the bad guy, they both take a moment to admire the women around them together. Not out of a competition, but out of solidarity in their sexuality.
Lots of potential.
It's a moment of them enjoying their bi-ness together. But Roman and Brian are cool, but not necessarily Roman and Monica. Roman insinuates that she might be loyal to Verone because she's sleeping with him, and then she says,
What's that supposed to mean?
Nothing.
perfectly echoing what Roman said earlier about Brian's involvement with Dom.
You should know.
What's that supposed to mean?
See, whether it's intentional or not, the text of this line is informing the subtext of the exact phrase that was used earlier. But after he comes back from the bathroom, he has a similarly over-the-top reaction to seeing Brian flirting with Monica again. I can't believe this guy. I leave him alone for a second and he's already schmoozing with someone other than me. But I think that this is the first time that he's not personally insulted by it. I think more so he's scared for Brian because he knows that Monica is Verone's mistress. Roman has kind of forgiven Brian by this point. So this reaction is a mixture of just not this again and you're being an idiot, Brian. And sure enough, Verone pulls a hyper-masculine intimidation on Brian for flirting with Monica, which leads to another Kuleshov effect.
Women are a very powerful force.
As we cut to Roman with an intense stare at Brian. And then we finally get an acknowledgement of the woman who got between Brian and Roman. Tanya. Now, I know you're thinking, who the fuck is Tanya? Who? Well, it's a name that's kind of thrown out there at one point. This is after they've kind of cooled their heads so they can kind of start to have a conversation about what happened. He compares what's happening with Monica to what happened to a girl named Tanya back in the day.
Just like that crazy ass trailer rat from back in the day, Tanya.
Tanya?
It's just a very quick conversation, but the first time they've really talked about a woman getting between them. But then Roman reveals that he also went and dated Tanya after it was all over.
Man, you went out with her after I did.
I mean, I couldn't let it go to waste.
And they both kind of laugh it off. When you're involved with people, a bunch of mismatches of friends and partners can happen, and it's kind of funny to look back on, especially when you've calmed down after the drama is all over.
Oh
This
my
comes
God.
across to me as very realistic, and also very bi. We then reach the climax of the love triangle arc. Monica sleeps with Brian, and the next day they wake up together, and Roman catches them. But now he entirely drops the jealousy act. He's still wary about whether he can trust her, but decides to actively help her escape. A real step of growth for him. He's accepted that Brian and Monica are into each other, and acknowledges that Brian doesn't owe him anything, so he gets to move on. And they stage a big diversion so that Monica can escape, and now at this point they're a team. They've put aside their past and are now totally focused on the mission at hand and looking out for each other.
Here we go.
You and me. Just like the old days.
Which then leads us to a beautiful scene on the beach in the sunset. Perfect romantic setting for them to say goodbye
He
to
is
each other.
eating a
Brian and Roman
burrito.
talk about their childhood friendship. Brian actually apologizes and explains why he couldn't be there for him. They actually talk about Dom Toretto, and they realize that the reason Brian let him go was for guilt on how he felt about how he treated Roman.
When you got busted, you know, whether I was a cop or not, you know, if there's anything I could have done, you know, I would have done it.
So why you let that dude go in L.A.?
Yeah, I think that had a lot to do with it.
Roman admits that being busted was entirely his fault and had nothing to do with Brian. They have a real emotional chat for the first time that isn't just bickering.
When I got busted, it wasn't your fault. It was all on me. Mr. Roman Pierce, riding solo.
Yeah, well, not anymore.
They've rekindled their relationship, and while it's no longer romantic, they're together. It's genuinely really sweet.
Not anymore, bro.
I'm not saying what Brian and Dom had was romantic, but there was maybe some sexual tension there for Brian. Something that reminded him of his ex. And being confronted with that
Yo,
again
that scene
made him
is
decide
wild!
to try and redeem himself. Regardless if it was actually his fault that Roman got busted, Brian felt the need to maybe atone for that. So not only is this scene wrapping up the wonderful rom-com plot, it's also recontextualizing the end of the first movie, something that I always love. It's deep in itself and also makes the first film deeper. And now that the relationship arc is complete, the rest of the film's heist plot plays out, with the two ex-lovers working together to best Verone, coming up with crazy ideas and driving together and really getting along. We get sweet lines like,
Nice driving, bro. Nice driving.
I got you, Brian.
my two beautiful boys. Oh, I love it. It's no longer bickering. It's just like really wholesome, really sweet partnership where they're gassing each other up all the time, complimenting each other, motivating each other to keep going because we got this, cuh. So this whole like crazy like Ocean's 11 kind of heist moment happens, which I thought was pretty fun when I first watched it. They work together to beat the crap out of this man in the most hilariously extended set of kicks. Like it just keeps going. Blah, blah, blah. Some cool action stuff happens. The car dives onto the boat. Woo! And Roman breaks his arm. Now, I'm of the opinion that any like injury that happens to a character is extremely metaphorical. It always reveals something about what's going on in their mental state. So Roman now being in a sling after this ending is a clear metaphor for how Roman is now in a state of healing and after reconciling with his ex-boyfriend. Healing from a relationship takes a lot of time, but now he's in the right place to heal. Monica asks, "You trust me now?" Which is a clear plea to her new boyfriend's ex, and Roman says, "You're all right," with a grin. Not only is Roman over Brian, he's accepted Brian's new girlfriend. But then she shakes his broken hand and he goes, because no matter how much we accept things in front of us, they can still be extremely painful. Even if someone is in the wrong, we need to be sensitive to others' feelings. And if we're not careful, we can still accidentally hurt them. This is something that we all need to learn. And Roman then decides to stay in Miami with Brian, this time as friends. They're gonna start a business together with money they frisked from the FBI. And oh my God. Too Fast, Too Furious is not just a heist story. It's the story of two estranged lovers who rekindle their friendship and realize that they function better as friends. They get to move on from the past and allow their heartbreak to grow into a more faithful, more honest friendship. Looking at like a real gay movie, coincidentally the best movie ever, we can see very similar visual language in the way that the romantic leads stare at each other. The performances have this hyper-masculine intensity, which you think would inform a straight male relationship. The moments that are rife with tension are so big that we realize it can't just be about a friendship. Things like Roman licking his lips right after seeing Brian, Brian whistling like a cat caller after Roman, the extremely dynamic camera turns when Roman turns to speak to him for the first time, the body language of the wrestle with Roman's waist in between Brian's legs in an explicit sexual position, throwing sand right at his junk. See, it's not just a romance film, it's a good one.
No.
The main characters have a really dynamic relationship, and it isn't just about getting the guy. It's an interrogation of a previously failed relationship, full of humor and vibrance that ends with reconciliation, not getting back together. They resolve their toxic breakup and reaffirm their love for each other, deciding to pursue the more healthy avenue for their connection, friendship. And that is a sincerely beautiful story. Let us collectively flag this movie as an official, iconic bi love story of the ages. Unintentional or not, it represents all of us and should be held up in the canonical LGBT landscape.
He's so excited.
Subscribe to my YouTube channel, leave a like on the video, and then also give me money on Patreon. Bye.
That is hilarious. Oh my god.